What are the best ways to stay up to date on the cruise shutdown, startup, refunds, and news? I'm Gary Bembridge. This is another of my cruising tips for travelers. Things are changing so fast at the moment, with cruise lines chopping and changing when they're going to be starting up or hoping to start up. Really complicated with refunds, when you can actually change your cruises, up to what date you can change your cruises. It's a whole lot of information and it's changing constantly and all the time. It's really hard to keep up to date. Obviously, if you look at newspapers or the media, that's not the best source in many ways, because you'll often get the more sensational stories, but you won't be able to keep up to date exactly with the detail of what's going on. YouTube videos are obviously great, but they cannot necessarily always be up to date in the very specific cruise line you're looking at and spot on what's happening in that particular hour, because a lot of these are changing by the day and even in some cases by the hour. So what I thought I would do is share with you how I keep up to date and what I use to keep up to date with everything that's going on, to make sure that as I plan my cruises, so I know which ones are being cancelled, I know when I need to be making decisions to be able to move cruises or get refunds, etc., 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 all those complexities. So I thought I would share with you the things that I use. There's actually a set of 8 different things that I use, so let me run through those, starting with this one. One of the great resources that I love and find incredibly helpful is a podcast. I really like podcasts, and one of the podcasts that I really recommend you take a listen to is by a guy called Doug Parker, based out of Florida, and he has a podcast which is called Cruise Radio. But the important one to listen to is Cruise Radio News. Every single day, it's a short podcast, maybe a minute, 2 minutes long, depending on the amount of news, where he updates the news from the last 24 hours. And it is a fantastic resource because it really, everything that's happening in cruising, and particularly at the moment with everything to do with the shutdown, etc. going on, he will give you the latest changes, updates, everything that's going on. So that's a really fantastic resource. It's very topical and it really is up to date. One thing I would say is all the links to what I'm talking about, I will have links to all the different sites in the description of this video. A second great resource, particularly if you want to check things out related to, is when is my cruise line or cruise line I'm looking at this point in time today, when are they saying they're going to start cruising again, which ones have they cancelled, and what's the latest situation with refunds, is to take a look at Cruise Critic. Cruise Critic, of course, is the biggest sort of resource for cruising in terms of reviews and information on the internet. Cruise Critic has a very specific page where they list alphabetically for both ocean and river cruising by cruise line what is the planned start date and when there's complexity. So for example, at the time of recording, this Carnival had stopped everything to one date, but then depending on the different region, it was a different date, and some ships was different dates. So they just simply list all of those, and it's a very good resource to just go and check. And again, I will have a link to that very specific page in the description. The third thing that I use, and I found this to be an incredibly helpful resource, because it gives me not only the news, but also a sense of what's also happening on the ships and where the ships are and issues and problems they might have with repatriating people and anything that's going on. And that is actually the cruise line Facebook pages. Now, the reason I talk about Facebook pages is, to be honest with you, I find the cruise line websites are not that helpful. So most of them, even if you go to it, they are all about the sell. So they'll talk about the promotions, the regions they're sailing in, the deals they're offering, and more buried within the website, you can find out information about their cancellations and refund policies, apply for refunds, that kind of stuff. And it's actually more hidden. So I don't use the cruise line websites unless I'm actually going to look for refunds to get that in, or I'm actually looking and starting to planning for future cruises. But what I do find incredibly helpful is their Facebook pages. And they have been very active on the Facebook page, and it's easy to understand because looking at the major cruise lines, they have around 5 million followers on their Facebook page. So it's a very powerful tool for them. So pretty much every single cruise line that I've looked at, from small to large, has a Facebook page. Carnival Cruise Line has a page over 5 million followers. Royal Caribbean, just under 5 million. Even MSC has almost 5 million. And then even down to Princess Holland America, Ponant, whatever it is, you'll find a Facebook page. So if you go to Facebook, search the cruise line and sign up. Most of them will point you to the main site, although some of them, so for example, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, some of those, they will then have sites specific to your country as well. But that's the place where they're posting their information on changes and cancellations and refunds. And a lot of them also give you the chance to do some customer service on there. So that I would strongly recommend. The fourth thing I use is actually also still linked to Facebook, although there is a great website and email newsletter, and that's a site which is called Cruise Industry News. So Cruise Industry News is on Facebook, and they post multiple times a day as soon as news breaks. The advantage with that is that it's cross cruise lines, so you'll find anything that's going on with any cruise line, they're posting the most recent news. Some of it tends to be more business focused than consumer focused, but it's quite interesting knowing what's going on. So you might find out more around what cruise lines are doing in terms of covering their financing or moving ships or things like that, which is also quite interesting to find out. On their website, although you can actually do it from the Facebook page, is you can sign up for their daily newsletter, although you can do a more consolidated one every couple of days. But Cruise Industry News is a great resource for getting a more general picture of what's going on in cruising. Another thing that I do use a lot to keep me up to date with kind of stuff that's going on are two sort of specialist sites. And I tend to look at them mostly on Facebook, although both of them do also have a website, so you can then go into the website if you prefer that. The first of those is Crew Center. Crew Center is run for and by crew members on cruise ships, and it's really interesting, particularly at this point in time, seeing what's happening with where crew are being moved, where they'll be taken off ships, and everything that's going on. So you get a little bit of insight about what's going on. And as I mentioned, they do have a website. The other one that I do keep an eye on, although they are pretty anti-cruising, so a lot of what they'll do is more the negative side of cruising, but it's still really interesting seeing where some of that perception and some of the stories that they're reporting. And that's on Facebook, and again, a website called Cruise Law News. So that's definitely something to take a look at in the general perspective. So those two sites I find really helpful to kind of get a sense of some other things that are going on in the whole cruising world. And it's been really interesting following those two sites with everything that's been going on at this point in time, because they're, again, very active. The next one that I also rely on and take a look at is cruise magazines. Probably the best known cruise magazine in the world is Portal Cruise Magazine. They're actually based out of Florida. And on their website, although they also have a Facebook page, but on their website, they have a section which is called kind of latest and news. And that's been really, really helpful for posting and keeping up to date with things that are going. They're very well connected because they've been around for a very long time. And they are extremely well connected with the cruising world, particularly that stuff based out of Florida and Miami and Fort Lauderdale. But it's been really, really good. And I've actually learned a lot of things. They've broken kind of the stories first. So Portal Cruise Magazine, certainly their online and their Facebook, is definitely one to follow. Those are probably the four main ones that I use and sort of interact with really, really often. The next ones that I look at is a couple of the bloggers have created very specific sites and pages where they're also keeping updates of everything that's going on, and also posting other posts or articles or videos if they're on YouTube with updates on the cruising shutdown. A couple of those to look at is Eat, Sleep, Cruise, Cruising with Ben and David, and Dave Monk, Shipmonk. So those are a combination of bloggers and YouTubers, and you'll find, again, links in the description, but they have really up-to-date information as well. And then the other one that I do take a look at is Twitter, of course. So all of the cruise lines have Twitter feeds. All of the ones that I've mentioned have Twitter feeds. But I've actually found Twitter to be less good and actually not as timely. And I think probably the reason for that is passengers themselves are probably more likely on things like Facebook. Twitter tends to be more business related, I've found. So it may be that they're much less active on Twitter because they don't have the scale of followers. You know, they don't have the 5 million followers. The cruise lines don't have the 5 million followers on Twitter. It's a much less powerful tool for them to use. But Twitter, of course, is really helpful and interesting. So sometimes I've found what I've used Twitter for is if I've seen someone posting something or talking about cruise line postponing or some change in regulations, I've sometimes gone on Twitter and just searched and seen what's bubbling up, and that's then taken me often to verify that on other news sites or websites. So that's the way that I keep up to date with everything that's going on with the shutdown, the startup, new terms, new rules, new regulations, things that are going on in this whole shutdown period. Hopefully you find that helpful and interesting, and hopefully you find those resources really helpful to you too. I have loads more videos, whether it's about the shutdown or cruising in general, so why don't you watch another one of those right now.